Hello, my friends, and welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gouveia. I am a criminal defense attorney at the R&R Law Group in the always beautiful and sunny Scottsdale, Arizona. And today, we've got a lot of news to cover. We're piecing together several different facets of the Trump Mar-a-Lago raid. And as usual, let's go on over to our mind map so we can see the big categories that we're going to be unpacking as the show progresses throughout the day. First and foremost, my friends, there is some groundbreaking news that just happened. Donald Trump over the weekend was sort of foreshadowing that there was going to be a big major motion filed. And you probably heard about that over the weekend. He was over on True Social, and we'll take a look at that. But literally moments ago, before I just sat down and pressed that Let's Go Live button, we learned that there was a brand new filing. And I mean, this is like fresh right out of the oven. Take a look at this. So here, this is over from the court docket. You can see today is when it hit the docket. August 22nd. Notice of judge and assignment. Optional consent just happened today. Notice to appear pro hoc vice. And then as you're going to see, we've got the actual complaint. Motion for judicial oversight and additional relief against the United States government filed here by Donald J. Trump. It's a civil suit. It's a civil kind of complaint, and we're going to go through that in detail. You can see I've already pulled that up here. It is 27 pages long, and so we're going to go through that in great detail today and just sort of read through the entirety of the document. But we need some background on that, and there's a lot to really sort of tackle there because it's 27 pages and it's a separate filing, so we'll go there. Then I want to make sure before that hit, I mean, I had a whole segment planned on the potential types of motions that might be filed, and we still may see filed. We learned from Donald Trump's lawyer, one of his attorneys, this gentleman here, and I didn't catch his name. He was out over the weekend and he said something about particularity and particularity with warrants. And so we'll take a look at that. Several other Trump lawyers were out hitting the airwaves over the weekend. We've got Christina Bobb, who sort of issued some warnings about what might be coming. She was saying, and a lot of the left on Twitter was sort of agitated by her warning, saying she's prognosticating the death of America. How dare she be incentivizing violence? It's almost like she's causing an insurrection. And so we're going to hear a lot more of that. Donald Trump is not going to be allowed to make a defense. Any defense that he makes, any sort of, framing of this is going to be labeled as causing disorder in America or causing chaos or whatever. So we'll get there. His other lawyer, Lindsey Halligan, was out over the weekend, and she was talking about, the FBI may have really touched some stuff when they were rummaging through Melania's closets. And, so we'll listen to her. And I was going to take a look at the docket from actually the search warrant case, because we've got sort of two cases now that are working their way through the system. One is the search warrant case, and the other is Trump versus the United States government for invading his property. And so we'll go through all of that in the first segment, and there'll be some heavy lifting on that. So we'll have to actually read through the document that literally just hit the court airwaves, internet waves, docket waves this afternoon. And then we're going to sort of segue that into Michael Cohen, because Michael Cohen is Trump's former lawyer or fixer guy or something like that. And he's got a new book coming out. He actually has called Revenge. And I think he's talking about his revenge against Donald Trump. But it was a very telling interview. He came out on CNN or wherever he was. Yeah, he was on with CNN, and he was talking to Jim Acosta. You can see Acosta right there. And they're getting into it. And Cohen is sort of hinting that he thinks Donald Trump should be charged with crimes or he should be indicted or something, but he has a really difficult time saying it. He kind of flubs it out of his mouth, and it doesn't sound too good. So we'll listen to him. We've got Adam Schiff, pencil neck, watermelon head. He was out also with Jake Tapper on CNN over the weekend, and he's talking, sort of a big game. I trust the DOJ. I trust Merrick Garland. This is going, to be all perfectly legitimate and highly justified, and I'm not worried about it at all. So we'll see. I think he is a little bit nervous. I think they're all realizing that this thing may be spiraling out of control. And then lastly on that segment, we'll take a look at this guy. I don't know his name. I'm not really important, but he's out there saying that Donald Trump is running circles around the DOJ, like the DOJ is sort of mismatched here. the entity that raided his home with FBI agents. Yeah, he's saying that they're mismatched. And poor Merrick Garland, he has unequal power over there at MSNBC. And to be fair to him, this is a point that I've been making. Donald Trump has quantity and volume and quality, right? His posts are a lot better than Merrick Garland's posts when he does post. And so we'll go through that. And then in our last segment, a little interesting development popped up over the weekend. We saw Dan Crenshaw. Some people call him Eye Patch McCain, like Tucker Carlson and others. Me sometimes have called him that. But he was out on the airwaves, and he's sort of doing like this about face, this like reverse shift. He's sort of trying to, I think, rehabilitate his image or his story or his narrative. I don't know. But he's really sort of being animated. First of all, we're going to start with Liz Cheney. Liz Cheney, she was out calling everybody a bunch of big liars like Ted Cruz and others who were, sort of Trump fans and whatever, right? So we're going to go into her. But we also know that she's talking about election concerns and election problems and things. And the point is, there's a lot of evidence from Democrats that sort of were doing the same things that Liz Cheney had problems with. So we've got a 10-minute video. We're not going to watch 10 minutes of it, but I do have a couple clips, so we'll go through that. But then Dan Crenshaw was out, and after Liz Cheney suffered a horrendous defeat, I mean, just brutal, then Dan Crenshaw came out and he sort of said, who? Liz who? Who? Cheminsky? From Wyoming? No, never heard of her. No idea who that is. And so he sort of bails on her and he says, no, remember that tweet I posted? Here's what I really meant. So Crenshaw came out, but then the best part of the whole weekend was this little segment. We'll get to that. Well, maybe not the best part. I'm really overselling it there. Let me just say this was an amusing clip, I guess. Was Crenshaw sitting there with Jake Tapper, and Jake Tapper is saying, "You're an ex-CIA, Secret Service, Navy SEAL? You're a Navy SEAL guy. That means you know how important the FBI is." For some reason, I guess they're correlated. And so Jake Tapper is trying to make the point that, as an intelligent person who used to work as a Navy SEAL, that means you have sort of close relationship with intelligence, and the FBI is an intelligence agency, allegedly. And therefore, you would agree with me, Dan, that the country shouldn't be demonizing the FBI, right? Right, Dan? And Dan says to Jake, no, Jake. FBI is a bunch of garbage losers. So Jake Tapper sort of had a heartbreak on, live on the air, and they didn't show it because it was probably so difficult for him. But as you can see, my goodness, we just have a lot to get to today. And if you want to be a part of the show, the program, the best place to do that is over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. You can see us chatting away over there. Shout out to John McGarvey. B Spec is in the house. Zach Nichols is over there. He's saying, hey, Just Cause, if you need a hand modding down the fort, you let us know. See the Veils shouting away over there along with Bonnie Spec, John McGarvey. Words Mean Things, too. Shout out to Words Mean Things. I saw JC the Music Man and others over at our community. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel by hitting that subscribe button. And that's right next to the join button. And if you're on YouTube, you can join. Shout out to Mark Owens, Shane Souza, Jenny B are in the house. They're all supporters, and they get the live or the morning walk and talks and, all of the other sort of extra videos that we put out. Like, for example, this weekend, I put out a video of my studio. Actually, we had some technical difficulties on Friday, and so I sort of showed everybody what it looked like, and that was fun. Don't also forget that I am a criminal defense attorney at the R&R Law Group, where we help good people charged with crimes find safety, clarity, and hope, not only in their cases, but beyond that in their lives. We offer free case evaluations over at 480-787-0394. We're very passionate about the work that we do, and we very much appreciate your referrals. You keep us busy, and even though we have a lot of fun here on this channel, sort of, duking it out with these jerks who are trying to control our lives, right? A lot of the work that we do is very important. We appreciate you supporting that work also. All right, and so without any further ado, we just might as well just get right into it. I said, this is a fresh one right out of the oven. Right before I hit the show, I saw it right on Twitter, it hit. Donald Trump and his team, they promised that they were going to be filing a big motion, and they did. Today, 27 pages hit the docket. It is a suit, a civil complaint that is demanding that the court appoint somebody for oversight, somebody called a special master. And you can see this here. It is Trump versus the United States. We are going to take a look at this document filed out of the Southern District of Florida. It's 27 pages long. I do intend to read through most of it, but we'll skip over the heavy lifting, some of the legal work there. But before we do, this is something that Trump was talking a lot about over the weekend. And on True Social, where you can follow me at Robert Govea, this is what he was posting about on the 19th and so on. He said, when will people realize that the atrocities being perpetrated by the FBI and the DOJ having to do with the raid and break-in of my home, Mar-a-Lago, or after years of other atrocities and unthinkable violations of freedom and the law? This has been going on for years, from the moment I came down the golden escalators in Trump Tower right up until the present. At some point, you have to look at what took place in the past to determine what is going on in the present. Trump says, and nothing has ever happened like that, which is going on in our country right now. The law enforcement of our country has become that of a third world nation, and I do not believe the people will stand for it. Between fraudulent elections, open borders, inflation, giving our military to the enemy, and so much more, how much are we all expected to take, says Trump. He continues, he says, never in our country's history has there been a time where law enforcement has been so viciously and violently involved in the life and times of politics in our nation. Even in light of the fact that they violated the Russia scam, impeachment hoax number 1, impeachment hoax number 2, the Mueller witch hunt, lied many times before Congress and on many occasions put out fraudulent information before the FISA court, they continue. They have no shame. They are destroying our country. And lastly, Trump promised this. He said, a major motion pertaining to the Fourth Amendment will soon be filed concerning the illegal break-in of my home, Mar-a-Lago, right before the ever-important midterm elections. My rights, together with the rights of all Americans, have been violated at a level rarely seen before in our country. Remember, they even violated and even spied on my campaign. The greatest witch hunt in USA history has been going on for 6 years with no consequences to the scammers. It should not be allowed to continue. And so that's Donald Trump on True Social, and that's over the weekend. And then boom, Monday morning, we learn this. Over from the Florida courts, we see this was the court docket, and we'll scroll all the way up to the top so we can see this. And of course, you can follow along on this. This is over at courtlistener.com, and you can just go and sort of follow along these cases. Look this case right up if you want to. There's the number. But you see the last update and the date of the last known filing and the date of the actual filing, August 22nd. What is this? It's a motion for judicial review where the U.S. government is the defendant because the U.S. government did something wrong, like they allowed an illegal search to happen. And so when you see what happened, we scroll all the way down and we can see the entries here. Motions to appear, pro hoc vice. These are lawyers who are coming in to appear on the court, several of them filing. We know this name, Evan Corcoran, right? Seen him before. James Trusty, we've heard about him. And then we see some other filings. Case gets assigned to somebody named Judge Eileen M. Cannon. They say the parties are notified that the U.S. Magistrate Judge Reinhart is available to handle any and all proceedings in the case. If agreed, the parties should complete and file the consent form on our website. So the case right now is with another judge, somebody named Judge Eileen, but they're talking about transferring this puppy back over to Judge Bruce, who is the original judge who signed the warrant. Now you see the complaint, and this is the top of the docket. This is what we are going to read now. Filed by Donald Trump for $402, civil cover sheet, text of the proposed order. Let's take a look at it. Here, filed out of the Southern District of Florida. It is 27 pages long. It is in the matter of the search of Mar-a-Lago, 1100 South Ocean Boulevard. And let's scroll all the way down to the bottom first so that we can see what they're asking for, so that we have some context. Okay, we have to know sort of what do they want? How expensive is this purchase really? Here's the conclusion, and this was submitted by Lindsey, Halligan, and James Trusty. We've already learned about them. We heard about them on prior shows here. They say, okay, this is what Trump wants before we get into the meat and potatoes. They say he wants to appoint a special master, okay, somebody who is sort of independent of the corrupt DOJ. And number B, they want to enjoin further review of seized materials by the government until that special master is appointed. So stop the feds from rummaging through the boxes and Melania's underwear. And C, require the government to provide a more detailed receipt for the property, right? Rather than listing this over as just sort of a big list of boxes. What did you take? What's in there? And D, require the government to return any seized item that was not within the scope of the search warrant. Okay, so 4 things there. We want a special master, a stop of the review until we get a special master, more details from the receipt, and a return of any item that's not within the scope of the search warrant. So 4 big things there. Now let's see how Trump is assembling this argument. It starts, a motion for judicial oversight and additional relief. President Trump is here and he files this motion, which seeks an order that does 4 of those things we just covered. Starting here, they say, introduction, politics cannot be allowed to impact the administration of justice. Nice, strong sentence. President Trump is the clear frontrunner in the 2024 Republican presidential primary and in the 2024 general election, should he decide to run. Wow. I think that's true. I think it's true. Here's his evidence. He says, footnote 1, for instance, a June 2022 nationwide poll of voters found that 84% of Republicans would support him if he ran. Trump leads the next potential Republican candidate by 44 points. Iowans for tax relief validate those poll numbers. And Joe Biden's support is in the toilet. Trump leads Biden by 11 points, according to his footnotes. So he says, all right, Judge, beyond that, his endorsement in the 2022 midterm elections has been decisive for Republican candidates. For example, on August 8th, no, he doesn't give us an example here, but he says, given that backdrop, he tells us, on August 8th, in a shockingly aggressive move and with no understanding of the distress that it would cause most Americans, roughly 24 special agents of the FBI, directed by attorneys of the US DOJ, hereby called the government, raided the home of the President Donald J. Trump. According to the government, the agents seized documents, privileged and or potentially privileged materials, and other items, including photos, handwritten notes, and even Trump's passports. Footnote 2 says, on August 15th, one after those items were seized, the government acknowledged the seized materials did include the passports belonging to Trump. Recognizing the passports were not validly seized, the government notified counsel for Trump so that they could be retrieved. They say all that was taken outside the lawful reach of an already overbroad warrant. President Trump, writes his counsel, like all citizens, is protected by the Fourth Amendment to the United States, and property seized in violation of his constitutional rights must be returned. Law enforcement, they say, is a shield that protects Americans. It cannot be used as a weapon for political purposes. Therefore, we seek judicial assistance in the aftermath of an unprecedented and unnecessary raid on Trump's home at Mar-a-Lago in Florida. From the first moment the government informed Trump through counsel that a search was underway, he demanded transparency. Trump asked the government the questions that any American citizen would ask under the circumstances. Namely, 1, why raid my home with a platoon of federal agents when I have voluntarily cooperated with your every request? And what are you trying to hide from the public, given that you requested that I turn off all home security cameras and even refused to allow my attorneys to observe what your agents were doing? And why have you refused to tell me what you took from my home? 2 points on this, right? 1, he's writing a legal motion, which is obvious, and we're reading through it. But he's also writing, this is a campaign message, right? This is bullet points that are easy to digest. And he's sort of encouraging Americans to put themselves in this position. And he's writing this as both a legal document and as a campaign promotional so that we can all feel it. So he says, as set forth in detail below, the government has declined to provide even the most basic information about what was taken or why. However, The scant information the government has provided, a vaguely worded receipt for property in the warrant itself, raises significant Fourth Amendment questions about this unprecedented and unnecessary raid. For instance, the government has informed counsel for Trump that privileged and/or potentially privileged documents were among the items that were seized. But the government has refused to provide any information about the nature of those documents. Supreme Court has said that documents about communications between Trump and advisors are presumptively privileged, meaning we just sort of start from the position that they are protected. He doesn't have to prove and make a showing they're protected. They just are presumptively protected and privileged. Protecting the integrity of these documents is important not only to Trump, but also to the institution of the presidency. And this is an important point. We're going to take a look at the Clinton sock drawer case. But remember that until Trump, most Democrats sort of revered, well, actually, that's not true. They only revere the presidency when their guy is in it. They thought that Bush was, a Texas yokel. They think Trump is an orange Cheeto, right? They sort of mock the presidency until their person is in it, and then it's the most revered institution of all time. But in the Clinton sock drawer case, the judge in there said, look, it is the president after all. All right, they're kind of like the president. So they get ultimate discretion on things like presidential records. And to say otherwise is to diminish their office. Yeah, they might have a lot of fun here dunking on Trump, saying that Trump doesn't deserve, these same sort of privileges. But that just diminishes their stature if the rules were to be evenly applied to them. Of course, they try to finagle their way out of that. Trump's defense, they say, Judge, significantly, the government has refused to provide Trump with any reason for the unprecedented general search of his home. To date, the government has failed to legitimize its historic decision to raid the home of a president who had been fully cooperative. Instead, faced with public backlash, Attorney General has taken the unheard of step of announcing at a press conference that he was willing to release portions of a sealed search warrant application. Government leaks, many of which we covered here, to favored media outlets have provided ever-changing and inaccurate, quote, justifications for the politicized conduct of the FBI and the DOJ. These unsupported justifications by anonymous sources hint at a breakdown in communications between Trump's representatives and the government, or that there developed a need to obtain a search warrant. The actual chronology of events clearly establishes that there was no exigency for a forceful raid, and there was no basis for keeping the information about the raid from the public. Right? What was the urgency? We talked about this. Was it like a scene out of Jack Bauer or Jack Reacher or 24? Oh my gosh, somebody's going to come and run away with the codes, and they're going to enter it into their iPhone app, and it's going to nuke the moon or something. What was the exigency? What was the urgency? They've got to justify that. Why do we? Movement, therefore, requests the court order the government to provide the information sought by this motion and take other measures set forth under Trump's rights to protect his Fourth Amendment. And they say, Your Honor, let me provide you with a little bit of background here on why this is necessary. And remember, they're asking for the appointment of a special master, somebody to come in here and tell the FBI, stop rummaging through his stuff, return the stuff that's outside of the scope, give us an inventory of everything that's in there, and be reasonable individuals about this. Background. President Trump's voluntary assistance, they tell us, on January 20th, okay, that's the day that Trump left, Trump and his family left the White House. They moved back to their home, Mar-a-Lago, historic landmark there in Florida. Beautiful place, mansion, 58 bedrooms, 33 bathrooms, 17 acres of land, extending from the Atlantic Ocean to the Intercoastal Waterway, hence the name Sea to Lake. Sounds nice. Consistent with every modern presidential transition, staff conducted the move on a condensed time frame. That move, like home moves undertaken by most Americans, involved boxes. It was done during the day with boxes in full view. After Trump and his family settled back into their home, employees at the National Archives inquired as to whether any documents were inadvertently transferred by the movers to Mar-a-Lago. January 2022, this year, Movement, that's Trump, voluntarily asked NARA movers to come to Mar-a-Lago to receive 15 boxes, 15 NARA boxes that had been brought by movers to Mar-a-Lago so they could be transferred to NARA headquarters in D.C. right? Voluntarily, Trump says, I called you. On February 8th, NARA made the following public statement. They said the following. They said, throughout the course of the last year, NARA obtained the cooperation of Trump representatives to locate presidential records that had not been transferred to National Archives at the end of the administration. When a representative informed NARA in December 21 that they had located some records, NARA arranged for them to be securely transported to Washington. NARA officials did not visit or raid the Mar-a-Lago property. Okay, so that's February. Meaning, sounds like they had like a peaceful transition of power of boxes there. And then they insurrected Trump's home. National Archives actually made that statement. Here's the archives.gov press release. Okay, in that release, they're saying NARA obtained the cooperation of Trump, and they're saying we cooperated freely. They came and got him. Sometime thereafter, NARA employees involved the White House and the DOJ in the matter of the voluntary returned boxes. National Archives says, we got our stuff, but we still need some help. So they called Uncle Joe and Aunt Merrick. Movement Trump was contacted because the 15 NARA boxes contained documents from his administration that were protected by executive privilege. And Trump's counsel communicated with representatives of the White House, the DOJ, NARA regarding these matters. Right? Trump says, I have legal entitlement to these things. My lawyers are in touch with your lawyers. They're mine. Here's why: executive privilege, presidential records, whatever justification you want. On May 11th, Trump voluntarily, italicized, accepted service of a grand jury subpoena addressed to the custodian of records for the office of Trump, seeking documents bearing classification markings. Trump determined that a search for documents bearing those markings should be conducted, even if the marked documents had been declassified, and his staff conducted a diligent search of the boxes that had been moved from the White House to Florida. You asked us to look, we did. On June 2nd, Trump, through counsel, invited the FBI to come to Mar-a-Lago to retrieve the responsive documents. The next day, on June 3rd, Jay Bratt, chief of the counterintelligence and export control over with the DOJ, actually came to Mar-a-Lago, accompanied by 3 FBI agents. Trump greeted them in the dining room, and there were 2 other attendees, the person designated as the custodian of records for the office of Trump and counsel for President Trump. Before leaving the group, President Trump's last words to Mr. Bratt and the FBI agents were as follows, quote, "Whatever you need, just let us know." Pops on in. Hey guys, good to see ya. Whatever you need, let us know. Responsive documents were provided to the FBI agents. Mr. Bratt asked to inspect a storage room. Counsel for President Trump advised the group that Trump had authorized him to take the group to that room. You need to see it? No problem. Come with me. The group proceeded to the storage room, escorted by 2 Secret Service agents. Storage room contained boxes, many containing the clothing and the personal items of President Trump and the First Lady. When their inspection was completed, the group left the area. Sounds very cooperative. Once back in the dining room, one of the FBI agents said, "Thank you. You did not need to show us a storage room, but we appreciate it. Now it all makes sense." Counsel for President Trump then closed the interaction and advised the government officials they should contact him with any further needs on the matter. Then, a couple days later, on June 8th, Mr. Bratt wrote to counsel for Trump. His letter requested in pertinent part that the storage room be secured. We talked about this. Put the lock on there. In response, President Trump directed his staff to place a second lock on the door to the storage room, and one was added. In the days that followed, Trump continued to assist the government. For instance, members of his personal and household staff were made available for voluntary interviews by the FBI. On June 22nd, government sent a subpoena to the custodian of records for the Trump Organization, seeking footage from surveillance cameras at Mar-a-Lago. At Trump's direction, service of that subpoena was voluntarily accepted, and responsive video footage was provided to the government. They're giving him everything. Then we get an application for a search warrant. They say, despite the voluntary assistance provided by Trump, the government took the unprecedented step of requesting a search warrant for his home. The government sought an expansive and intrusive search of President Trump's office, all storage rooms, and, quote, all other rooms or areas with the premises used or available to be used by President Trump and his staff in which boxes or documents could be stored. Take a look at the search warrant. The government also sought an expansive definition of property that it could seize, which included not only responsive documents and associated boxes, but also, quote, any other containers or boxes that are collectively stored or found together with the aforementioned documents or containers. They say essentially, the government secured authorization to seize boxes that just happen to be located near potentially responsive materials. Okay, anything that's like in the wingspan, the general vicinity, that's close enough. You get it. They continue. Section C, the unprecedented search of President Trump's home. Belying any actual urgency, the government waited 3 days until Monday, August 8th, 2022 to execute the search warrant. Early in the morning on August 8th, a group of roughly 24 FBI agents gathered on the premises at Mar-a-Lago carrying boxes and other items. At 9:10 a.m., Mr. Bratt telephoned counsel for Trump and informed him that a group of FBI agents was at Mar-a-Lago to execute a search warrant. Heated discussion ensued as to why the government did not make a voluntary request to explore the premises, given the expansive assistance that Trump had provided up until this point. Mr. Bratt then made several requests. The first made by Mr. Bratt, was that all CCTV cameras, closed circuit television, be turned off at Mar-a-Lago. Pursuant to Mar-a-Lago policy, and in the absence of any court order directing such a measure, this request was declined. Mr. Bratt also requested the names of any attorneys who might arrive at Mar-a-Lago on behalf of Trump. In turn, counsel for Trump requested a copy of the search warrant and the affidavit in support of the warrant, and asked to be provided with a list of anything seized once the search was over. Bratt declined to provide the search warrant and affidavit, stating that after the FBI agents finished their search, Trump would be provided a copy of the search warrant and a receipt for property, not the affidavit. Right? And this is where there was a lot of fighting over this when this was all unfolding, saying that Trump's people were lying because they said they gave him the warrant, and they said we didn't get the warrant. And we even made the point that they're probably sort of saying, they're expecting the search warrant and affidavit to be the whole thing. Trump. So when they say we didn't get it, they mean we didn't get the whole thing. And they say you got part of it. You got enough. Now, among other actions, they write, taken after being notified of this unprecedented event, counsel for Trump contacted 3 attorneys in the area who agreed to go to Mar-a-Lago. And once they arrived, they requested the ability to enter the mansion in order to observe what the FBI was actually doing there. The government declined that to occur. After approximately 9 hours, the FBI concluded its search. An FBI agent provided one of the attorneys who had been waiting outside for nearly the full 9 hours with a copy of the search warrant. FBI also provided a 3-page receipt for the property. We've seen it. That list provided almost no information that would allow the reader to understand what was seized or the precise location of the items, because they were just box A, box A21, box A35, whatever. On August 11th, then a couple days after the raid, counsel for President Trump spoke with Mr. Bratt by telephone. The first item of discussion was a message from President Trump to Attorney General Garland. The message was as follows. They say, Bratt, who is counterintelligence, is speaking with Trump's lawyer. Trump is trying to communicate this message through Bratt to Attorney General Garland. He says, listen, Trump needs to communicate this. Okay, listen, Trump wants the Attorney General to know that he has been hearing from people all over the country about the raid. And if there's one word to describe their mood, it is angry. Okay, the heat is building up. All right, the pressure is building up. And whatever I can do to take the heat down, to bring the pressure down, just let us know. Tells that over to Merrick Garland. We're trying to calm this down. In addition, counsel for Trump asked Mr. Bratt, 1, can you provide a copy of the affidavit? 2, can you please appoint a special master to protect the integrity of the privileged documents? Can you provide a detailed list of exactly what was taken from Trump's home, not just generic boxes? I want to know what was taken and where it was taken from. And number 4, I'd like to allow counsel for Trump the ability to take a look at what was seized. Let me come and take a look at what you're rummaging through there in your offices. Mr. Bratt declined these 4 requests. Sorry, no, you don't get to do anything of that. No, thanks for asking, though. To end the call, counsel for Trump requested that all on the call keep the line of communications open. All right, well, look, just talk to us. If you're going to indict him, if you're going to arrest him, just let us know. But just hours after the call, Attorney General Merrick Garland came out with a press conference. He came and said the following. Just hours after the telephone call, Garland took the unusual step of holding a press conference to deliver remarks regarding the search of Mar-a-Lago and the government's motion to unseal the search warrant and receipt for property. Mr. Garland made no mention of Trump's clear and unequivocal message to him, right? Garland didn't say that his people talk to my people. In fact, the government made no response at all to Trump's invitation to help reduce public consternation with the government after the raid. Trump says, how can I help calm this down? They said, ignore it. Instead, Garland comes out afterwards and says, just now, the Justice Department has filed a motion in the Southern District of Florida to unseal the search warrant and the property receipt related to the FBI raid. The search was on the premises of Florida belonging to Trump. We didn't make any public statements that day, but Trump did. Copies of both the warrant and the property receipt were left there with the lawyer on site. Now they're saying they didn't get the affidavit, and they didn't. The search warrant was authorized by a federal court upon the required finding of probable cause, blah, blah, blah. Then he said about the issuance and the execution of the warrant, he says, first, I personally approve the decision to seek a search warrant in this matter. And second, the department does not take such a decision lightly. Where possible, it is standard practice to seek less intrusive means as an alternative to a search and to narrowly scope any search that is undertaken. Right? We're not going to just go raid presidents willy-nilly. Then he says, the public statement, this is Trump's team, he says, this public statement is deeply troubling given that President Trump is the clear frontrunner in the 2024 Republican presidential primary and the 2024 presidential election, should he decide to run. The statement clearly suggests that the decision to raid Mar-a-Lago, a mere 90 days before the 2022 midterms, involved political calculations aimed at diminishing the leading voice in the Republican Party, President Trump. All facts laid out herein show that there was complete cooperation between Trump, his team, and the appropriate agencies, and Mr. Garland's remarks stray from long-standing DOJ policy, footnote number 5. If you doubt me, they say, just go over here to the Justice Manual, section 1-7.400, and you can look it up. It says, the DOJ generally will not confirm the existence or otherwise comment about ongoing investigations. Oh, well, they commented on it. So they broke their tradition, didn't they? The decision by the Attorney General to conduct a hastily prepared press conference to announce his intention to release the search warrant was an ill-founded reaction to the public outcry that followed the raid on Trump's home. See, so they're skewering him for releasing the information, as they're saying you should release the information, because all of this is unprecedented, right? They're right to do this. The DOJ is breaking precedent everywhere they turn. Every time everything they step on is breaking. So Trump's defense makes the following argument. They say, Judge, here's why you should appoint a special master. Number one, the extraordinarily unusual conduct of the DOJ, it raises fundamental Fourth Amendment concerns, obviously. The Fourth Amendment to the Constitution says as follows: the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, and other things, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause, talking about particularity, the place to be searched, and the person or things to be seized. Very important amendment. Now, prior to any indictment and the availability of various grounds of suppression from evidence, the mechanism that provides grounds for relief is Rule 41G. The rule says that we have to protect the rights of citizens who have been aggrieved by unlawful searches and seizures of property. And even as the government is dug in against transparency in this case, fighting the release of the affidavit and claiming a redacted version would be worthless due to the need to hide the actual substance, there are significant red flags that implicate Trump's Fourth Amendment rights and cry out for judicial intervention by way of a special master monitoring and discovery assistance. Wow. I agree. They say the warrant is facially overbroad on one example. Permitting agents to seize entire boxes of documents merely because they are physically found together is clearly overbroad. And they cite a 11th Circuit case. They say searches deemed necessary should be as limited as possible. and that limiting searches is very important. They say boxes of personal documents, things like photographs, items like clothing, these are not contraband. They may not be lawfully seized. You don't get Melania's blouses, special agents. Is that plural for blouses? In fact, the search warrant's broad scope was in violation of the Fourth Amendment's particularity requirement, and thus the warrant permitted a general search. That's prohibited. Unconstitutional, since the red-coated soldiers created the need for the requirement in the first place. Similarly, they say the government sought to improperly evade limitations on enforcing the Presidential Records Act. Right? And we've talked about this. This is the Clinton sock drawer case. Clinton had recorded interviews with a biographer. He took those with him, and then something happened. Nobody knows what happened to him. Judicial Watch sued the National Archives and said, you let him get away with presidential records. The judge in that case came out and said, those are his records. We defer to the president. They're personal if he says they're personal. But now they're saying that's not the same standard that applies to Trump. Here, the investigation regarding Trump's return of the NARA boxes involved a NARA referral to the DOJ based on questions relating to the documents falling within control of the Presidential Records Act. But the PRA accords the president virtually complete control over his records during his term in office. And there is no criminal enforcement mechanism or penalty in the PRA, because how are you going to penalize the president? Did the DOJ's National Security Division, NSD, recognize that deficiency and then decide to recategorize this case on that basis, simply to manufacture a basis to seek a search warrant? And more importantly, did the NSD and the FBI mischaracterize the types of documents that it sought to seize to avoid the lack of enforcement mechanism? Right. So what they're saying is these people are making their claims that this raid was justified under the PRA. But if you read the PRA, it doesn't say you get to go do search warrant raids to go get documents back. Right. It's not in there. Like in DUI law. Right. If you don't give consent to have a blood sample drawn from your body, most states like Arizona and others have something called implied consent. There's a law saying there are penalties if you don't do something, and they have the right to get a warrant and take it from you anyways. It's all codified. So they say that, well, you have to give us that blood or we have the right to take it. Here's why. The Presidential Records Act doesn't say, yeah, you can go get the overdue library books from the president and you can raid his home if you want to. It's not in there. The government's reckless pursuit of a search warrant implicates well-established basis for suppression under the Fourth Amendment law. They tell us under controlling Supreme Court precedent, a search warrant violates a person's Fourth Amendment rights if there are material misstatements or material omissions in the affidavit. They write, did the DOJ mischaracterize or omit from its affidavit the true extent of Trump's cooperation? Did they say that Trump was not cooperating when we have got this big laundry list of he sent this letter, his counsel said this letter, FBI came in, he came over there, gave him the old fist bumperoo, said, whatever you guys need, you got it. You let us know. Did the FBI agent put that in his search warrant affidavit when he was submitting that to the judge, yes or no? Press reports by anonymous government sources raise this question, they write. Trump's lawyers also asked the judge, they say, Judge, in addition, did the special agent who drafted the warrant, did they fairly disclose any pretextual or dual purpose at work for this warrant? Like, for example, did they want to go get my letters from Kim Jong-il, but then did they want to go see if I had any January 6th stuff in there? Maybe. For example, the receipt of property largely fails to identify the seized documents with any particularity, but it does refer to a seizure of an item labeled executive grant of clemency about Roger Jason Stone. So why would they take that? Aside from demonstrating that this was an unlawful general search, it also suggests that the DOJ simply wanted the camel's nose under the tent so they could rummage for either politically helpful documents or support other efforts to thwart Trump from running again, like the January 6th investigation. There it is. Interestingly, in the government's response to the motions to unseal the affidavit, the government claims public exposure to the affidavit will, quote, jeopardize this investigation and, quote, other high-profile investigations, which we mocked last week saying, oh, all of the other presidents that they're raiding their homes? Yeah, all of the other parallel Mar-a-Lago raids? Yeah, no. The phrasing suggests the DOJ has other interests at work than simply collecting documents with classified markings. They say, finally, the elements of national security statutes, like those referenced by the search warrant, and other things about administrative rules about classification and declassification, they say, these are complex matters. Did the FBI special agent, when they were drafting up this search warrant request, did they fully disclose the strictures of those statutes and Trump's authority to declassify those documents? Like, did they make the pitch? Did they say, Judge, Trump has the right to declassify like virtually everything, but not these. Here's why. Here's how we overcome that. So are they arguing for that at all? Or did they just say his library books are overdue, Judge? See, let's go get them. Did the affiant, the FBI agents, did they disclose that there are public statements by those with knowledge indicating the documents searched had already been declassified? This could establish that there were violations to Trump's Fourth Amendment rights. That's why we got to see the documents, they say. And they continue, they say, look, Your Honor, the court knows the government has long treated Trump unfairly. DOJ and the FBI have demonstrated a willingness to treat Trump differently than any other citizen. 2 years of noisy, quote, Russia collusion. And those investigations led to special counsel finding that biased FBI agents and officials exist. Stories of FBI agents engaging in information laundering, where a fired informant continued to feed the FBI false information through a DOJ official to investigate Trump. And even an FBI general counsel lawyer falsifying documents to support a FISA warrant and penetration into Trump's inner circle back during the campaign. An assistant director at the FBI was referred to prosecution for lying repeatedly about the Trump probe, and text message exchanges between the lead agent, Peter Strzok, and Lisa Page, the FBI lovers, reflect their complete disdain and bias against President Trump and his supporters. All the while they were entrusted with probing the farcical Russian collusion hoax. Trump's defense says, look, without any further information from the government, Trump currently has no ability to assess whether any FBI agents involved in the Russia defamation matter are participating here with the NSD in the current situation. Historically, courts tend to give significant deference to law enforcement reps who weigh in against non-disclosure of sensitive materials because of the investigative needs. But Trump's team says, in light of the recent FBI behavior, when Trump is a part of its aim, this court should feel obliged to demand candor and transparency and not just, quote, trust us assertions from the DOJ. The appointment of a special master with a fair-minded approach to providing defense counsel with information needed to support any Rule 41G filing is an appropriate use of this court's authority. And this court should appoint a special master under B to protect Trump's constitutional rights. Federal rules of civil procedure talk about this court's ability to fashion equitable remedies, to balance the playing field, so to speak. The government has requested in cases involving seizure similar things in other cases, and therefore we should be able to request the same thing. They say the receipt for property that we got out of the government is so vague and lacking in any specificity that the reader does not even know what was seized from Trump's house. Seized documents reflecting presidential communications with advisors are presumptively privileged. All things starting at zero, we start with their privilege because they're presidential communications with advisors. The documents seized on August 8th were seized from Trump. They were created during his term as president, right back then. Accordingly, they are presumptively privileged until proven otherwise. That's a U.S. Supreme Court case called Nixon. Only an evaluation by a neutral reviewer, somebody who is in fact a special master, can secure the sanctity of these privileged materials. As a general matter, says Trump's team, the likelihood that the government seized privileged materials suggests the need for a careful review process. For example, while there has never been a search warrant executed at the home of a president, federal regulations acknowledge the delicate nature of reviewing privileged material. Different officers need to be involved to make sure that we take the utmost care with privileged materials. This investigation undoubtedly involves the same type of materials. During the Clinton presidency, this issue of privilege, specifically the presumption of privilege, was raised in response to a grand jury subpoena directed to the White House counsel. While the context differs from the president's case, the court's analysis of the nature of the evidence sought by the grand jury applies with equal strength here. In that case, the court adhered to the Supreme Court ruling. They say when a president of the United States asserts a claim of executive privilege, the district court has a duty to treat the subpoenaed material as presumptively privileged. All things starting at zero, we just say, look, if the president claims it, he is the president after all. We're just going to say it's presumptively privileged just because they claimed it. Furthermore, if at the time of the documents or at the time the materials were created, they reflect presidential decision-making and deliberations, they are also presumptively privileged. Why might that be? Because it's decision-making, it's deliberations, right? It's sort of a product of the president's mind and the president's advisors' minds. Sort of like attorney-client privilege. Why does that exist? To protect that relationship. This is a strong presumption and not merely lip service, they say, from a DC Circuit case. With the conclusion that the materials seized from Trump are all presumptively privileged, it is unreasonable to allow the prosecution and their team to review these documents without meaningful safeguards. There's precedent. It's presumptively privileged. We protect those privileges. It's not lip service. Short of returning the seized items back over to Trump, only a neutral review by a special master can protect the public interest and also protect the confidentiality of the conversations, balancing the two sides. Yes, we know that you've got an interest in prosecuting criminals, but we also have an interest from the defense perspective of making sure that the documents are not problematic. The DOJ filter team will not protect Trump's rights. They say the government has told Trump that they're using a filter team over with the department. Don't worry about this. Yeah, we know that there's privilege protected information in there, but don't worry about it. We have a filter team on there. In certain instances, a filter protocol can serve as an important role where they seize documents, but as the Justice Manual notes, they can be used for limited reviews. Here, however, it's a little bit more than that. The implementation of the filter protocol was procedurally deficient. They say that there were some problems with how they implemented it. They also say the magistrate judge approved the filter protocol without any input from the defense. So there's sort of a due process problem here, right? Judge says, oh, filter team, no problem. Filter team's perfect. What are you guys going to do? What's your plan? Sounds good to me. Versus saying to the defense, how do you feel about that since you're the person whose rights are going to be implicated? The defense makes that point. They say the result is a protocol that is plainly ineffective. It does not ensure that the prosecution team members will not access or become aware of the materials as the filter team prosecutes. And in other words, how do you ensure that the filter team actually filters? Fundamental fairness requires, says Trump, a special master. The court is considering analogous issues and considering those types of matters. Previously have appointed special masters before. You've done it in other cases. You should do it here. In particular, this court and others have assessed the use of special masters when we're talking about things about privilege. And they cite some other cases here, referencing the cases where those came from. Case called The matter has captured the attention of the American public. Merely adequate safeguards are not acceptable when the matter at hand involves not only constitutional rights of Trump, but also the preservation of executive privilege. Trump submits that the appointment of a special master is the only appropriate action for it to have any meaning at all, and the U.S. should cease its review of seized materials. They want an inventory. You see here, Federal Rules of Criminal Procedure saying they want a more detailed inventory. The receipt for property doesn't do anything other than detail that it's secret, top secret, or confidential. They say this level of detail does not meet the standard of verification under the rules. They say an inventory of the property is ministerial. However, it's a matter of fundamental fairness that the agents at least identify from what location the boxes came from, where the boxes were, whether the boxes were at the location or whether the agents brought the boxes to the locations with them, whether the confidential labels were used or how they labeled the documents and the boxes. Therefore, they say the property receipt is legally deficient and we need more than that. This, along with the inspection of the full affidavit, is the only way to ensure that President Trump can properly evaluate and avail himself of the rules. Therefore, for the foregoing reasons, we ask, 1, a special master be appointed, seized materials be returned, more detailed property receipts, and a review of everything that was in fact seized, signed off on by Lindsey, Halligan, and James Trusty. And that is the massive monster motion that Trump said was coming. It hits the court dockets on April 22nd. And we've got several pending issues to continue to contend with. We saw that the issue of particularity actually did come into play. Trump and his team were saying that, you know what? They said that they were just searching for things like this, right? This is a screenshot directly from the warrant itself. They said that they were looking for any government or presidential records created between January 20th and January 20, 2017 and January 20, 2021. Okay. The entire presidency, they want materials on. And I mean, beyond that, right? It's not just the presidency. It's basically Trump's entire tenure, even before he was president. No, after he was president. The entire presidency. Every single stinking document. They want it. And Trump's lawyers, as we know, they were also hinting about this. They said that they were going to be filing a motion. Here is one of Trump's lawyers was apparently on the Mark Levin show, and Fox News got a clip. Here is what he was talking about.
Fourth Amendment requires particularity. It requires narrowness to the intrusion on the person's home. And this warrant had language in it. And keep in mind, all we've seen is a warrant and an inventory. But the warrant has language in it about if you find a classified document, you can take the whole box around it, and you can take any boxes near it. And that's really the functional equivalent of a general search. There's just no limit to that kind of scope in the warrant. We're going to come out swinging and say, look, you know, this cannot be something where we just get a kind of a wink and a nod from DOJ that we're supposed to trust them under these circumstances. We're going to have to get court involved, judicial interventions at the district court level to get somebody in the mix here that can help us vindicate the Fourth Amendment rights of the president.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we saw, right? That's exactly what they filed. And that document hit the court docket, you know, today. And I wanted to show you very briefly the case that came out from this judge, Judge Amy Berman. We read some of this last week, but this was important. And I highlighted a couple excerpts from this case. This is the Clinton sock drawer case. This is where Clinton took records and they said, you really can't do anything about it. Here is one snippet from Judge Berman in her opinion. And we covered sort of some of this opinion, but it's a very powerful opinion because here's what it says. She writes, thus, the Presidential Records Act requires the president to maintain records. Okay, this is all relevant to Clinton of his administration, but leaves the implementation of such a requirement in the president's hands, citing U.S. Code 2203A, 44 U.S. Code. So if you take a look at that, she writes the following, okay? She says, practically speaking, what are you going to do about this? What standard of review would apply? She cites footnote 4. And she says, would there not be a high level of deference accorded to a president's decision about which records are personal? Like, don't we just leave it up to the president to decide? Because they are, after all, the president. And in this case, right, this judge is probably fawning over Clinton or whatever. Oh, he's a president. He gets to decide. And then she says, how could a challenge to a president's classification decision be litigated without the decision maker participating as a party to the lawsuit? If a classification decision is reviewable, like if the president says these are personal records and you say they're not, who reviews that? And what statute of limitations applies? Okay, when does it expire? Would that period have expired in this case, given that President Clinton has been out of office for 12 years? Like, can you get to litigate this forever? Statute of limitations means that you're out of time. Like, there's nothing else you can't bring a claim now because it's too much time has elapsed. Like if you're in a car accident, you can't bring a lawsuit 10 years after the car accident. You've got to bring it soon because you're going to heal. And they need evidence that's relevant, that's close in time to the violation or to the accident. So here, okay, they say, what are we going to do about this? Bearing in mind the Armstrong decisions and other, they say that she writes, the court has seriously doubts about whether the former president's retention of the audio tapes as a personal matter is a matter that is subject to judicial review. What does that mean? The courts can't even look at it. So they can complain to us, but what are we supposed to do as a court? If the court says to Clinton, you mislabeled your documents. I'm a judge. I'm telling you, Mr. President, that it's not a presidential record. It's this other thing. And you're in trouble now because I'm a district judge and I said so. It's ridiculous, right? She's saying here that exactly. I have doubt whether I can even judicially review any of this at all. But now in this case, suddenly Donald Trump is perfectly legitimately prosecuted, right? Everybody's suddenly forgetting about the Clinton sock drawer case, turning this into, the crime of the century where other presidents got a lot of deference. Now, there are Trump lawyers who are out there explaining that a lot of Americans are identifying these massive double standards and taking issue with them. This is Christina Bobb. This is the lawyer for Trump who was there on scene as the FBI was raiding his property. And she came out and she's sort of hinting that a lot of upset people are going to have opinions about this in the foreseeable future. And a lot of, sort of lefties were on Twitter over the weekend saying she is threatening violence. She is prognosticating that if Trump doesn't get his way, that this is all going to come crashing down because of Trump, right? Almost threatening the DOJ. And as I've said before, they're going to try to do this for Trump. Every time he makes a defense or files a motion, they're going to say that he's undermining democracy, right? If he goes in there and he says, yeah, the FBI is corrupt, just like any defendant would do in any case, any criminal defendant in any part of this country, when you're charged with a crime, you say, cops are liars. Cops falsified evidence, not mine, somebody else's, right? It's all casting doubt on the prosecutorial process. It's part of the law. It's part of the adversarial system. You don't want a system where defense attorneys just say, great job there, prosecutor. Well done. Wow, what, amazing. Oh, this police file looks perfect. Well, okay. Well, you got him. Nice job. See you on the next one. Right? That's not how this works. But if Donald Trump comes out and he castigates the FBI, they're going to say that he's undermining democratic values. Here's Christina Bobb talking about this with Newsmax.
I don't see an indictment coming down. I also think the nation's reaction to this raid, I think the department was surprised at how angry America got and how frustrated we all are that we feel like we're losing our rights. And this is so overly political. So I think it's causing them to go, oh, maybe we don't have what we think we have. So I hope that they take a second look and are cautious about doing something as stupid as trying to go after President Trump.
Well, yeah, especially
they've tried this before.
That's the sentence, right? That's the sentence. I hope they do something and think about this before they go after President Trump. And you ask yourself, is that an unreasonable thing to say? We've all been asking that they think about this before they jump into it. Because if this really is a situation where Hall Monitor Merrick Garland and librarian National Archives are upset that Donald Trump had some overdue library books from Barack Obama, a letter to him when the transition took place, right? Presidents write letters. Apparently one of the letters was Obama wrote Trump a letter. Got to get that back. And Kim Jong-il or Un or whatever wrote Trump a letter. Got to get that back. If this is overdue library books and they invaded and raided his home, yeah, a lot of people are going to have some problems with that. Here is Trump lawyer Lindsey Halligan, who actually filed and submitted the motion that we just read through earlier today. Here she is talking about some of the problems with the FBI and how they might have interfered with the chain of custody, right? You want to have a very clean chain of custody. Person A gives it to person B, and nothing happens in that handoff. But what happens if person A gives it to B, B gives it to C, C gives it to D, D gives it to E, and in there, you've got a rogue Peter Strzok, or you've got a rogue Lisa Page lying around, who are sitting in there trying to say, we're going to take care of him. We'll stop him. Trump's not going to succeed as long as we're here. Well, then they might corrupt that chain of custody, which is exactly what Lindsey Halligan is implying here, which is a perfectly legitimate defense theory. I have books written with chapters on this stuff.
For some reason, they demanded the security cameras be switched off. Are these reports true that it was rather an unpleasant experience for you and your colleagues and the staff at Mar-a-Lago?
Well, I arrived after they already started searching. So I think they started searching around 10 a.m. and I didn't arrive until about 11:30. So I wasn't there for any sort of scuffle that happened before. I can't speak to that. But when I arrived, I asked if I could go inside the property and they told me no. And I asked why not. And they said, you can come in when we're done. And I asked if I could stand in an area of the building that they're not searching. And they said no. So they had unfettered access to the property and did God knows what and looked at God knows what.
So they could have done whatever they wanted. Did they give you any reason, any justification why the security cameras would have to be switched off, Lindsey?
No, they didn't ask that to me specifically, but I am assuming that their argument would have something to do with protecting the identity of the agents. I'm not sure.
All right, so more info there, and of course they're going to be attacking that chain of custody, rightfully so, something you would do in any criminal case. In fact, it's a huge part of almost every criminal case, is checking the chain of custody, in particular in DUIs. Now, here is a quick update on the Trump search warrant docket. We can see the latest filing came in, and there's not a whole lot of new activity here today. So yeah, the other docket that we reviewed where Trump is actually filing a complaint demanding a special master has some more there. This is the actual search warrant docket. Here you can see a couple things were unsealed, but I checked these earlier and these are not anything interesting. These are the orders to seal essentially and the motions to seal. We've already covered those. So not much new here. Docket entry 84. Michael Barth, we read through some of his stuff last week. He filed an appeal, notice of an appeal, paid the appeal fee. He wants access, and he wants to be allowed to intervene. Remember, several people were denied the ability to intervene, and they're now appealing that. So clerk transmitted the notice of appeal, and those will all go up on appeal, and we'll continue to watch this as it unfolds. But that is the latest on Donald Trump. Now, it's not just the filings. You know, Trump and his team are out hitting the airwaves, but a lot of the Democrats and a lot of the people in the media are sort of trying to sell books, really. Former Trump lawyer Michael Cohen flubs an interview when he's on CNN with Acosta. He tries to say Donald Trump should be a criminal and he should be indicted and all this stuff, and he kind of has a hard time with it. So we'll see what that means, because he's saying Trump is responsible for a lot of really bad things, but then he sort of doesn't say that they're bad enough to warrant criminal indictments. And so really kind of an interesting interview. We'll listen to him. Then we've got Adam Schiff, who also hops over there on CNN. He's there with Jake Tapper, and Jake Tapper asks him some pretty pertinent questions. They say, hey, Adam, first of all, you know, the affidavit would be nice to see. Don't you agree? And he says, yeah, it would. But the more important question is, what about this precedent that this is establishing? Do you think that this might be abused and that Trump, when he wins, if he wins, might use this to raid your home? Adam, what do you think about that? So we'll listen to him. And then we've got this poor guy, this fella who's very just sort of depressed that the DOJ, which has hundreds of thousands of employees and FBI agents with armed guards and FBI invaders, are outmatched, outclassed by Donald Trump. And so, as you can see, there's going to be a lot in this segment. Let's start at the top. Here is Michael Cohen. Now, this guy has a book coming out. I think it's called Revenge or something like that. And he's been doing this weird anti-Donald Trump shtick. Probably has a lot of debt to pay and doesn't really know what else to do anymore. So he sort of reoriented himself towards undermining Trump and selling books and appearing on shows with this guy. And so they get on here, and I want to pay close attention to this because he doesn't actually say a whole lot of anything. This is kind of the Michael Cohen shtick. He just kind of goes on for about 45 seconds. And we're all asking ourselves about, you know, a very important question. What next? What's the consequence? Should Donald Trump be indicted? Should he be prosecuted with crimes? I mean, what are we doing here? And Michael Cohen, as we're going to listen to, is going to be, he says, Donald Trump should be charged with a crime, and then he walks it back. And then he says that he should be almost indicted, and then he walks it back. Let's listen to it.
Yeah, I think ultimately what's happened now is time has gone.
I think the volume's a little bit low. Let me boost this up a little bit for us here and then I'm going to replay this because I think that was a little bit low because he's sort of speaking from the back there. Let's see what this does here as we play this one more time.
Yeah, I think ultimately what's happened now is time has gone on and these investigations have now advanced and the information, the truth has come out. And the truth is never good for Donald Trump. And in this specific case, yeah, he's had 9,000 lives. But at the end of the day, you have all of these people who have been brought in, who provided testimony. You have documentary evidence, like the evidence I provided to the House Oversight Committee, that implicates Donald Trump in a multitude of illegal, or I should say improper actions.
So did you hear that, right? That implicates Donald Trump in a whole slew of what? Illegal? He walks that back right away. He says illegal, or I should say improper, because they're not illegal. So what is all the material that he turned over to the committee? Is it anything useful or not? Let's listen to it one more time. And then he says that he should be what? Indicted? No, he says that he should be brought to court because there's nothing there.
Implicates Donald Trump in a multitude of illegal, or I should say improper actions that he should be brought to court on. One of the biggest problems that we have is they're afraid. I don't understand why, but now that's passed. You have Fannie Willis in Georgia, the case is moving forward. Our New York Attorney General Tish James. You have even now
Tish. He's talking about Tishy.
The DA. You have in Washington. There's a multitude of litigation that has come against this man. So extreme. I also don't understand why we're so fixated on getting him for everything. You don't need to do that. Let's get him on the simple stuff, the stuff we already know, which is tax evasion, misrepresentation to banks, lying on personal financial statements, like what they did to Al Capone. You don't have to get him for X, Y, and Z. Let's just get him on that simply to put him where he belongs.
Insane. Like, these people are insane. Is get him however we can possibly get him. Get him on a parking ticket, right? It doesn't matter. They just wake up just frothing mad with little Trump spittle coming out of their mouths because they're so angry about him. And, we can all get the spittle from time to time, but, Michael Cohen, he's from New York, right? So, all right, so we've got that. Now he's out there. He doesn't even have enough evidence to indict Donald Trump. Doesn't even want to use the word indict. Doesn't even want to use the word criminal, right? He says a criminal, or I should say improper. No, Michael, we want to know. Because you can't charge somebody for an improper crime, right? It's got to be a crime. It's got to be criminal, not improper. Otherwise, you're just talking in circles. You're just sort of bloviating with Acosta on CNN. But speaking of CNN, we've got Adam Schiff, pencil neck watermelon head, who's out over here, and he's on us also with CNN. We've got several Tapper clips. First one is of a Schiff, and he's sitting here talking about the aftermath of the Mar-a-Lago raid. And remember that Mar-a-Lago was, so only one part of the fascination here, is, he leads the January 6th committee, I guess is where I'm going with this. And so let me turn this volume booster off, and then we'll pull up Adam Schiff, and we'll listen to what he has to say and break this down.
A federal judge will consider releasing a redacted version of the FBI affidavit this Thursday. The Justice Department is, of course, asking to keep it sealed. They say that it could provide a roadmap for potential defendants and witnesses. As a former prosecutor, what do you think we could learn from what's in this document? And do you agree that there's a clear public interest in learning the justification, at least some of it, for this search?
Well, you could learn a lot from the affidavit. You could learn what witnesses may have seen in terms of the handling of those documents or people coming and going from where the documents were located. You could learn about whether representations were made that proved to be false in terms of whether they've given up the classified information. You could learn a great deal. That's just the problem, though, for the Justice Department. I think probably their concern is very legitimate. That is, that if this affidavit is revealed, it will put those sources of information at risk. We've seen the president retaliate against anyone he considers a whistleblower.
Yeah, so if he defends himself,
we've seen the president's incendiary rhetoric already lead someone to go to an FBI building with a assault weapon, who was shot to death by the FBI defending itself. So
if Trump defends himself, if he makes any rhetoric that is capturing eyeballs, then he might be incentivizing violence. He might be somebody who's contributing to, unsafe situations for FBI agents and others. And it's certainly difficult to have a defense when you can't even speak, lest you be, responsible for deaths of FBI agents. This one came in from Nope, Hell Nope, says, I wonder if TDS qualifies for Canada's euthanasia treatment. I saw that. We look around this country and we're sort of just diminishing the value of life. Not just this country, around the world. It's kind of shocking, isn't it? Yeah, just kill yourself. No problem.
The Justice Department identify are real. Now, the public interest is also real, but I think the question is, at what point in time does the public get to see that affidavit? And I think the Justice Department makes a powerful case that at the early stage of the investigation, when it could jeopardize the pursuit of justice, this is not the time to be giving essentially the Trump lawyers a roadmap into how to intimidate witnesses or how to derail a legitimate investigation.
Yeah, so they don't want Trump and his lawyers to know anything more about this. Now, the problem with that is that as a defense attorney, as a defendant in a criminal case, you have the right to know what you're being charged with, right? You have the obligation to figure that out to defend your client. And in this case, right, this is different because this is the former president who is being prosecuted by his political enemies. And so in many types of investigations, their default status is, well, we can't talk about it. I've made this point many times. The presumption of innocence is greater with Trump than the default position of, sanctity of an investigation, for example. Right? We can weigh and balance these two factors out. And we find, right, my opinion in this whole thing, obviously, we default to not prosecuting your political enemies because that's Pandora's box that we don't want to open. They're opening it. They've got to explain the opening of it. Hasn't happened before. They've got the burden of proof on that whole thing. So now we're asking ourselves about this precedent, and this came up with Tapper and Schiff, and they say, hey, Shifty, might be a balance of power change here pretty soon. Donald Trump might be in charge. He might be running the shots soon enough. Are you going to be happy if he raids your home? And, maybe he will because of what Adam Schiff has done on the January 6th Select Committee. Let's see what he had to say.
Last week regarding the raid on Mar-a-Lago, the search warrant on Mar-a-Lago. Have you heard back from the intelligence community? And do you have any concerns about the potential for this precedent, a search of a president's house, to be abused?
And we want to get to the bottom of it. In terms of the precedent, I'm confident that Merrick Garland took every precaution, made every effort short of executing the search warrant to obtain those documents. And if the public reporting is correct that the Trump lawyers asserted in an affidavit that they'd given all these documents up and the Justice Department had good reason to believe that wasn't true, then it justifies this means of getting the information, the execution of a search warrant. So yes, it's a very powerful precedent. At the same time, I'm confident that it was used appropriately given the circumstances.
You do believe that you're confident that this whole thing was conducted appropriately, given what we have followed here with the FBI and with the DOJ and all of their prosecutions and the entire litany of problems that they have had with other inquiries. We covered Michael Sussman here. We've talked about all sorts of problems, including the Whitmer kidnapping plot, which the FBI basically concocted, and several of those defendants were acquitted. So precedent is defaulting against trusting the FBI, right? Based on what we have talked about recently. And especially when it comes to Donald Trump and, these types of political prosecutions, it's only seemingly one-sided thus far. Now, we here have this gentleman who's very upset. He's saying, Donald Trump, he has his whole social media platform. And Donald Trump has an unfair advantage. He can just get out there and just post truths, and he can just get out there and tell lies, and he can say whatever it is he wants. And the poor DOJ, poor Merrick Garland, they don't. They're just sitting around on their laptops, and they're just, concocting fictional narratives about actual power in this country. Donald Trump is a citizen now. And so what kind of power does he have that diminishes theirs? I don't know. But listen to this poor fellow just cry about it.
What's the difference here? Because in history, police, prosecutors, and judges are always targeted by the bad guys, right? They're always anybody who put anybody in jail or caused anyone to be convicted knows that someone's going to be after them, and they live with that. What's the distinction here between law enforcement, prosecutors, and judges doing their jobs normally, and this rhetoric that's been amped up by Donald Trump, causing new sets of alarm and fears amongst law enforcement?
Yeah, and it's sort of an unequal battlefield. I think the difference here is essentially that Donald Trump just has this massive platform and a lot of followers. The basic megaphone that he has really brings up a lot of these threats. I was talking to former Attorney General Eric Holder last week, and he was saying that there's essentially this mismatch between what Donald Trump can do and what DOJ can do, because DOJ lives by a certain set of principles and rules. They have to follow certain procedures. There's a tradition within the Justice Department of not speaking sort of outside the so-called four corners of an indictment, so to speak. They typically like to speak through the court process. But Donald Trump is, posting these things on Truth Social and making all of these claims. So it is just sort of a mismatch, because you don't want to sort of get down into the dirt with someone who is making these unsubstantiated claims against the FBI, but they are having a real world impact, as we saw at that FBI field office in Cincinnati, and as we've seen with all of these threats that are coming up on social media. So it's a really sort of a pickle that the Justice Department is in here.
It's a pickle.
We saw Merrick Garland deviate a little bit from typical DOJ policy while still going by the bounds. The only reason that Merrick Garland spoke publicly on this was because it was the former president himself who decided to make this public. So they're trying to make this more of an equal playing field, but really it's sort of a mismatch between DOJ and Trump in this instance, Allie.
It's a mismatch. Donald Trump has more power, more heft, more authority, I guess, to dictate how all this goes, from his Truth Social account, and with his, 80-something million followers who are out there, I guess, angry as hell, and the DOJ is now finding themselves in a pickle. Well, who put them there? They did. Maybe they shouldn't have broken centuries of precedent before they did. They are causing their own demise. And that, my friends, somebody's saying, might be a short and a chord. Everybody can hear me now, right? All right. And so I think that we're good. I can see the audio spikes are working. Somebody said the audio dropped for a minute or two. Dog Digger on Rumble said the audio went out for a minute or two. But I think it's good, right? Everybody can hear it. Might have happened. All right. And so we're not done with Trump yet. We've got one more section here, one more segment here. And of course, this involves Dan Crenshaw and Liz Cheney, because they're sort of at it these days. Dan Crenshaw seems to be jumping on the Trump train. He's definitely not on the Liz Cheney train anymore. He was there in Wyoming hanging out with Elon Musk and Kevin McCarthy. But Liz Cheney, we saw her. She just lost and face planted in one of the most epic election failures of all time. One of those things that you never really get to forget or live down, kind of as a lifetime defining failure. Liz Cheney still milking it up, just trying to get out there and capture the limelight by getting her face in front of the media. Here is Liz Cheney, and she's out talking to this fella over on ABC. And they're saying, Liz, you're America's hero. Lady Liberty. What's your advice for us now that you've suffered a catastrophic historical defeat?
What does your defeat say about Trump's hold on the Republican Party?
I think, one, it says that people continue to believe the lie. They continue to believe what he's saying, which is very dangerous. I think it also tells you that large portions of our party, including the leadership of our party, both at a state level in Wyoming, and that, we really have got to decide whether or not we're going to be a party based on substance and policy, or whether we're going to remain, as so many of our party are today, in the grips of a dangerous former president.
Yeah, okay, the audio did die on that one. I'm not sure what that one was about. But okay, so that's Liz Cheney, right, saying that everybody is just a big liar. Yeah, and the audio did cut out. What the heck was that all about? I don't know what that was about. I heard it too. But okay, Liz Cheney is out saying that there was a bunch of big liars out there who are interfering with American democracy. And I came across this clip, which was also a very interesting one. And this is 10 minutes of Democrats who were out there talking, hemming and hawing about election interference.
You can run the best campaign. You can even become the nominee. And you can have the election stolen from you.
Oh, 10 minutes of this. Watch.
Trump knows he's an illegitimate president.
The president-elect, although legally elected, is not legitimate.
I don't see this.
Waddling Nadler.
President-elect as a legitimate president.
You said you believe that Russia's interference altered the outcome of the election.
I do. We have a president who, if in fact it is proven, has been assisted by the Russians and may in fact not be a legitimate president.
The one thing that Trump is fearful of when it comes to his being president is that finally we will see how illegitimate his victory actually was.
What?
I have an objection.
I object to the 15 votes from the state of North Carolina. I object because people are horrified.
He's an illegitimate president.
Do you believe Trump is a legitimate president?
What I believe is that there's no question that the outcome of this election was affected by the Russian interference.
There absolutely is a cloud of illegitimacy.
So that legitimacy is in question, yes. So that was a very tainted election. And in that sense, it's illegitimate.
Why do you think the president is going to such great lengths to essentially prove that he beat you?
Because he knows he didn't. He knows he's an illegitimate president.
Oh,
Stolen
my
email.
goodness.
Stolen drone.
Wow. So, yeah, you can see, right? The list goes on and on and on. So this is something that has happened, after every single election, almost every single time. But Donald Trump is the only person who merits a January 6th investigation that lasts months and months and months, that warrants criminal prosecutions of all of his top advisors, and the list goes on and on and on. So Liz Cheney is out there after just a massive failure, and Dan Crenshaw, somebody who, we've been a little bit critical of from time to time, is, out there sort of backpedaling a little bit. Remember, some time ago, Dan Crenshaw posted this on Twitter. This was back on January 13, 2021. He says, in response to Liz Cheney there were calls for her to resign. Remember, after January 6th, she came out and started running her yapper. And then people were saying she should resign for being so, not a Republican. And Dan Crenshaw came out and he said, "Listen to me, America. Let's get some truth on the record. Liz Cheney has a hell of a lot more backbone than most and is a principled leader with a fierce intellect. She will continue to be a much needed leader in the conference with my full support. We can disagree without tearing each other apart." And many people were sort of on him about that. And he sort of said a bunch of nice things about her after the fact. He was sort of, she's a nice person and all this. And meanwhile, we're watching her make up a bunch of stuff during these fake January 6th Select Committee hearings. But after she loses in just a catastrophic defeat, now Dan Crenshaw hits the Instagram waves. And here's what he said after her loss.
From some trolls on the internet that I endorsed Liz Cheney in her primary election. Obviously not true. Now, what these people are doing is spreading around a very old tweet, like over a year and a half ago.
I just read it
nice
for
things
you.
About Liz. Back when we all supported her, voted for her for conference chair, and then she went off the deep end and we all stopped supporting her.
She did go off the deep end,
I was in
that's
Jackson
for
Hole
sure.
this week, but with Kevin McCarthy, who was supporting Liz's primary opponent, and then we congratulated her. So, the truth here is that there's people on the internet who lie to you, and they continue to lie to you, and they especially like lying about me because they know that you'll click on it. So whoever shared that with you and took the date off, cropped it so you couldn't see it, couldn't get the context, whoever did that, unfollow them. They're lying to you now, and they'll keep lying to you.
I just read you the whole stinking thing. There's the date on it. All right, there's the date. I put the date on it. There it is. January 13th. I said it. All right, so I don't know what the date has anything to do with it, but okay. So I guess, all right, so saying that I guess it's a recent thing and she's gone mental, so he's not in favor of her anymore. Okay, well, so he bails on her, and you know, he was a sort of an anti-Trumper there for a while, and then now he's sort of joining Team Trump. He was sort of Team Liz Cheney. Now he's Team Trump, and he broke Jake Tapper's heart over the weekend. Jake Tapper just wanted to bring him in here. He knows he's a friendly Republican. He says, listen, Dan, you know, you're a former Navy SEAL. You're very, very intelligent also because you hate Trump like I hate Trump. I'm intelligent. You hate Trump. I hate, therefore we're both intelligent. Perfect. All right, welcome to my show. Dan, can you tell me, sir, since you're so intelligent, how you feel about Trumpers castigating the FBI and belittling them and all of their incredible work? Listen to Dan.
Let's start with the fact that you're a former Navy SEAL. You have depended on the intelligence community in very real, tangible ways to protect your life and those of your brothers. As someone who understands just how precious intelligence can be, I'm wondering if it bothers you that there was apparently
get ready for it
classified information in an unsecured location at Mar-a-Lago. We know that one box was labeled TS-SCI, that's top secret, sensitive, compartmented information.
Yeah. Well, look, you know me, Jake, and I'm not one to withhold criticism and even make my own side mad. I want to get to the truth. But I will be honest with you here. It's hard to justify what the Department of Justice did here, in my opinion. And here's why. Here's what it really boils down to. It's not a question that it's bad to have classified material in a non-SCIF environment, right? So that's a non-secret compartmentalized infrastructure there. That's wrong. But there's ways to mitigate that. There's ways to resolve that issue. And I still haven't seen any evidence that that Trump was even asked to give these documents back. He's been cooperating with them on these issues for a while now, for months. And so why take it to this extreme extent? And I think that's why you're seeing so much backlash from Republicans. You're seeing everyone coalesce. It doesn't matter what side of the issue they're
you are.
Trump.
Yes, you are. That's for sure.
Coalesce around this one because it does seem unjust, and there does seem to be a long history of loss of credibility at the Department of Justice at the hands of Democrats, and I think people are rightfully frustrated about that.
I think well, first of all, I think there are a lot of Hillary Clinton folks who would argue that, you know, they don't think that they were treated well by the FBI.
Absolutely. So they just get...
Wait, Hillary Clinton folks that said they weren't treated well by the FBI. Did Hillary have her house raided by the FBI?
To the point, though.
So, but...
did the audio go bad again? No, here it is.
Let's start with the fact that you're a former Navy SEAL.
Oh, we already got that part.
You have depended on with Trump. You've seen a lot coalesce around this one because it does seem unjust. And there does seem to be a long history of loss of credibility at the Department of Justice at the hands of Democrats. And I think people are rightfully frustrated about that.
I think first of all, I think there are a lot of Hillary Clinton folks.
Yeah, so Hillary Clinton voters. Okay, so Dan Crenshaw seems like he's got some problems with the DOJ investigation with the FBI invading Trump's residence. And I think rightfully so. There are issues with that. And it's very interesting. As Dan Crenshaw said, people are starting to coalesce around Trump. Even Dan Crenshaw, who used to be Team Cheney, now Team Trump. And we've got a lot more to follow and to cover on this. But now, my friends, is the time to hear from you. And so let's do it by jumping over to watchingthewatchers.locals.com. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm using this new software, so I'm trying to figure out how to do the YouTube super chats. And I think I botched it for the day today. So I see that James Jarvis says, I bet behind that eye patch is a junk drawer. LOL. Oh, my goodness. Let's see what else here. Mad says he left his brain at home, too. That came in from Mads. And there are others. But I think we're sort of light on the super chats, which is perfectly okay. That means we're just jumping right over to locals. And let me do a refresh on this because we had Jeremy JC, the Music Man, got us started off over on locals. You see him there. He says, good afternoon, Robert. I just wanted to be the first to comment by saying hello and hope you had a great day. Well, I hope you had a great day too there, Jeremy. And I'm glad that you're over here on our locals chat. Three Girlies is here. Says that lawyer is Jim Trusty. He is a former federal prosecutor. He contributes on Fox. He's a new addition to Trump's legal team. Here is the profile of Jim Trusty. And the youngest girlie says hi. She wanted to shout out. Shout out to the youngest girlie. It's a beautiful Monday shout out. Start of the week. So a lot of energy. See who this gentleman is. Yeah, I saw his picture, but I didn't learn too much about him. Here he is. 28 years as a prosecutor. Oh, gosh. He brings extensive law experience, RICO, computer fraud. Federal government has broad interpretations of statutes, and so he's going to fight back against them. Love it. Career served in the DOJ criminal division. My opinion on these flip-flopping prosecutors. I talk about purebloods and, I was never a prosecutor, pure blood defense attorney. That's right. I said it. And Ifra, he seems like it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with former prosecutors. I'm just saying they're not pure blood defense lawyers. That's all. That's all I'm saying. All right. And so that was over from Heather over on locals. Let's see what else we've got. C Rose says, hey, Rob, you ever miss defending clients in court? I've only spoken 5 or so times, but I still find the feeling I get hard. I'm sorry. Let me start this over again. I kind of read that one improperly. I've only spoken 5 or so times, but I still find the feeling I get hard to replicate. It's like taking a big bite of Hawaiian pizza and sipping on a Pepsi while watching T1. In all seriousness, do you ever miss court? Have you ever appealed a case? And if so, did you win? Yeah, actually, I did. Well, yeah, so I did. Yeah, I have one. I've appealed. Look, when I talk about I appealed a case, I typically, I have other people who help me assemble an appeal and follow all the rules, and then it gets filed. But yeah, we've won appeals, and I've won special actions. I've sort of appealed to courts. I got blood thrown out in a DUI case, which was awesome, from a Texas case. It was great. Got a prior thrown out on a Texas. A lot of fun. Yeah, I do miss it. Yeah, I do miss representing clients and going to court from time to time. But, my career has sort of evolved now. I've got to I honestly say this all the time. I have a team of lawyers who are way better at it than I am, because that's what they do all day. They wake up, they think, oh, I'm going to court and defending clients, and this is what they do. And so we've gotten a little bit more, we've aligned the seats a little bit differently. There's a very interesting concept in business. It's called your unique ability, right? What is your unique ability? What is it? I don't know. And I think mine's a little bit different than being a pure litigator, right? I mean, somebody who's just a pure litigator. And I think I've got some other skill sets and some other visions and other passions in my life than being a pure litigator. And so what I want is, right, pure in court, just going around, kind of hanging out with the judges and the prosecutors and mostly other defense attorneys, right? A lot of defense attorneys, you kind of just sit in the rooms and wait and commiserate. But it is fun. It's a lot of fun. It's very rewarding to help people, to send people off and say, man, that person is in a way better position. Way better. Oh, the sounds, I got to fix, I still must have a short somewhere. C. Reed says, Netflix and Frank the movie. I don't know what that one is. TOS Forever says, Joshua Phillip on the Epoch Times stated that this raid was a retaliation by those agents and the legal staff involved with the Russiagate and effectively negatively. Yeah, I think that I did see some of that. I saw that the Crossfire Hurricane team is the same team that worked on this current raid. This one came in from Reference. This one says, what's with Christina Bobb, Trump's lawyer, doing Mar-a-Lago interview? She's so bad. No talking points, no plan. Fox interviewers keep needing to coach her into actually defending the president. I haven't seen that. No, I haven't seen that. I mean, we played the Christina Bobb, one of those reference. We played one of those interviews here of her today. And it was somebody saying Viva had mic trouble too. I wonder if it's just the audio. I wonder if it's YouTube. I had problems with YouTube last Friday. It can't be YouTube. It's probably me. I'm sure it's me. But okay, so that came in from TOS Forever, and then reference says, no plan. You know, I didn't see that. I just saw her. It sounded like she had a talking point to me when she was there. She said, well, what was her talking point? I can't remember what it was, but I don't know. I mean, I don't really know what that problem would have been. Solar flares, FBI hacking me, satellites. Yeah, YouTube, FBI, DOJ, Merrick Garland, who knows? All right, we've got Heather says, do you think this magistrate stepped into a steaming pile of doo-doo when he signed the warrant? Yeah. Do you think he's regretting opening a can of worms? I don't know. Also, I mean, you have to know what you're doing. Like, you have to know. So he probably was okay with it, I guess. Since this is a civil action, what is the likelihood this magistrate will be ruling on the special master? I hope it is an actual judge and not the magistrate. Well, so I'm not sure if you caught that, 3 girlies and the youngest girlie, but there was that one section in there in the appointment. Let's see if I can see it here, actually. This is it. Yeah, so it's sort of up to the judge. If agreed, the party should complete and fill the consent form. It says U.S. Magistrate Judge Reinhardt is available to handle any and all proceedings in this case. And so I'm guessing Judge Eileen Cannon is actually the district judge. I'm going to guess, right? She actually is a federal district judge. Let's see. And it looks like that's true. So here she is. And then basically it's her saying that, well, I can't see from this bio here, but you get the point. I think it's a federal judge who's saying Bruce Reinhardt is available if you need him. So it sort of depends if the parties agree, then we may see him or we may not. We'll have to wait and find out. Thunder 7 says, Rob, what is a special master? Think of it like a sort of like, what's the word? Independent, like the IG's office, OIG, Office of the Inspector General. Independent oversight, managerial person to make sure everything is going above board. Are they political appointees? How do we know? No, typically they're like former judges, like retired judges. How do we know we won't get an Obama-Biden devotee? We don't. We have no idea. Happy Old Cat Lady is here, says, I believe they want Trump to win the primary as a backup plan. It's going to be easier to get independent swing voters to vote against Trump than against DeSantis. I don't disagree. I think that they could, they could put him up against like a Gavin Newsom or somebody, right? Somebody shiny and new that most people don't know about, that promises a bunch of crap. And if you think I'm making this up, do you remember what happened with Obama? People said, oh yeah, Chicago. Nobody wants to live like Chicago. And look what happened for 8 years. Even if every Republican voted for Trump, it's the swing vote that wins the election. In the Democratic primary, it was all about who could win more than who best represented their platform. Only reason they chose Kamala was to cater to woke voters. At least according to the book, Better Battle for the Soul, inside the Democrats campaign to beat Trump. And 2, if they want to protect the witnesses who are identified in the affidavit, put them in witness protection. Isn't that what it's for? Find them a minimum wage job. Well, happy old cat lady, that's one way to do it, I guess. But the point is, like you have the confrontation clause. And if you're going to have witnesses, you're going to have to bring those witnesses into court at some point. And so they've got to prove the case, right? They've got the burden of proof. I don't know. Yeah. Yeah, AM is telling me software might be cutting off when the mic says it's higher than the audio. I'll play with the audio after the show. Yeah, it's not. Yeah. Okay, so we have another comment. Thunder 7 says, I've got so many questions with the motion you read, including why Trump's lawyers didn't file a case. Appears they're playing a very clever game by pointing out how they were persecuted by the FBI for years. Now they're educating the public about how the different rules exist for Trump and Dems. The MAGA crowd knows this, but even the moderate Dems are witnessing how a justice system has been weaponized against Trump. It's probably the first time they heard the truth. Interesting. Yeah, good comment from Thunder7. Heather says, welcome to the freedom of speech, dumbs. Sounds like you're struggling with the First Amendment being strong enough that the government doesn't have a loud enough voice over a civilian. Last I checked, civilians were supposed to be stronger than the federal government, and that's why there's limits on the federal government. That's Heather. Shout out to the youngest girlie. NY Renal MD says MSNBC is asking Eric Holder about fairness and consistency process as being hugely ironic, given that he was found in contempt of Congress but not charged. Meanwhile, Steve Bannon was. Eric Holder is a living example of Judicial and Justice Department bias. Good comment. Antar says, you're becoming my favorite lawyer with the tie with Viva, Barnes, and Rekieta. Woo, well, that's good company to be in there, Antar. That's a pretty good company. Some very astute, highly intelligent, sophisticated gentlemen. Nice group of individuals there. Love the analysis every night. Says Trump is getting hit by the deep state because they fear him and that he will take them out of power. Crenshaw is a neocon fool like he always is. As a member of the U.S. Navy who deals with intelligence community, when I went to schooling for it, I understand why the intelligence community and the upper echelons act the way they do. Many of them have the developing characteristics to become heavily corrupted. Seeing Potato Head and Cheney going down within a week is one of the best white pills we could have asked for. Also, fraud Fauci as well, but the deep state will find another person. Yeah, I forgot to say farewell and bon voyage to Fauci. Good riddance to him. Gosh, we have another one from Thunder says, people like Cohen who have TDS are mentally ill. It's actually a recognized mental health disorder. It's also getting worse the more popular Trump becomes. Well, yeah, we missed this on Friday, but I mean, my goodness. Did you see that Sam Harris interview? Meltdown, epic proportions. Can't wait until he returns his POTUS. They aren't enough tranquilizers to calm these lunatics down, and they're going to end up having heart attacks or getting ulcers. They also need to take deep, long breaths and not... Oh, Thunder, I almost read that comment, and that would have not been good for my YouTube censors. But, I caught it, fortunately. And I'm going to do a quick refresh over here and then check some of the YouTubes and check some of the Rumbles and check elsewhere. And I think we're about wrapped up for the day, my friends, which is about appropriate. And I think that is it for the day. Now, let's see here what else we've got. Over on Rumble, shout outs to my friends before we get out of here. ZZ the Boxing Cat is over there. GN Amarin is there. Dog Digger, Isle Paint, Hiker number 7. Monk 3614, Larry 1 is in the house, along with Chill Casa. I see Just Cows is in the house saying Shane is so breaded and he's also keto. Wow, that's like really unbreaded. You're like keto, like no carbs, no bread at all. It's amazing. Shane Souza says, cheers to everybody out there in the interverse. Shout out to all my friends out there. Larry 1 says thanks. Over on YouTube, we've got Zach Nichols says, bread is bad. Oh, we have a Rumble rant over there. Let's see here. Let me pull this one up. Let me pull this one up on the screen so I can share it with you. Yeah, so John McGarvey says, oh, dang it. What happened? Dang it. Where'd that go? There it is. John McGarvey says only cutting out for 5 seconds every 5 minutes or so. And I wonder if it's audio is if I'm speaking too loud. Like if I go too loud, does it cut out? Does it cut out? No, I think it's still there. So no. He says, okay, don't tread on me. And we had some other quotes here. Don't tread on me. America, Punisher, appeal to heaven, I think is something saying there. Thank you, John McGarvey, for the details on that. Now, I'm going to be able to troubleshoot this after the show. I'm going to see if it's showing up on the audio. I'm going to see if it's on the recorded file, on the audio file that's on the stream, on my recorded switcher file. We're going to diagnose this problem, and we'll be back to figure it out tomorrow. But I saw another one come in from Reference. Reference said, why isn't the passports issue a bigger issue? Saying, here it is. Saying FBI had 9 hours to search and sort the documents, and yet the property receipt was clearly missing material items. It's a good question. Yeah, that's from Reference. It's a very good question, and I think that it is probably because they were just, coming in with boxes and just rounding everything up. Oh, here this is, and here this is, and here this is. And just, probably a little distracted by Melania's, lingerie boxes, Oh, gosh. Get the passports, just get everything. Let's just get the hell out of here. This is getting weird. So, who knows? Now, I honestly do think it is an issue, right? It is an issue because it shows clearly that there was a lacking of particularity, that they were just gobbling up everything. Why did they take those passports? It wasn't specified. Is it contemplated in the actual search warrant, in the affidavit? Don't know. But we're, obviously want to find out before we allow a former president to continue to be prosecuted. Curtis Bartle says, great show, Rob. Yeehaw, with the cowboy emoji. Thank you, Curtis Bartle, for that. I do appreciate it. And it's very generous. Let's jump over to locals and do a final refresh before we wrap it up for the day. See if there's any others that had come in. Yes, there are. Here is Tricky. He says, your audio cut out, and now I'll never know your vision and where you want to go with your career. Yeah, I know. It's just, well, I guess I'll have to repeat it at some point. Good to see you, Tricky. I don't know what I was going to say either. I probably couldn't repeat it. Thunder7 says, I thought Christina Bobb was great with her talking points. She spoke about how she was booted out of Mar-a-Lago and had to wait outside in the sun for 9 hours, wasn't given a full warrant, and how they demanded the cameras be shut off and the staff be refused, and how she felt the entire raid was illegal and unconstitutional. Bobb was just one of Trump's teams of lawyers. There are plenty out there talking. Came out from Thunder7. Tweak says, Rob, speaking of TDS, someone should warn Liz what happens if you don't treat it in time. It's not pretty. Yeah, I don't really know who this is. Is that Hillary? Oh my gosh, I think that is Hillary. Is that Bill? I think that's Hillary and Bill. And I don't know who those two bros are. Maybe Secret Service agents or something, but all right. Well, they're walking out there. And that is Tweak. Shout out to our friend Tweak. And everybody else out there who was a part of the show today. We are going to leave it right there, and we'll be back again to do it all tomorrow. But I want to thank everybody who was a part of the broadcast today. Big shout out to my friends over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com, which is our amazing community. And we do morning walk and talks. We posted a video today talking about the bomb that took place in Russia. What else do we talk about? Well, we talk about all sorts of stuff. And so join us at watchingthewatchers.locals.com, or you can click that join button right next to the subscribe button, which is right next to the like button. I would really love it if you gave us a like before we wrapped it up here today. We're sort of, we're over 1,000, which is very nice of you. Thank you. And we have our law firm, the R&R Law Group. We're located in Scottsdale, Arizona. We help good people charged with crimes find safety, clarity, and hope, not only in their cases, but beyond that, in their lives. And we appreciate your referrals. Free case evaluations over at 480-787-0394. We love to help good people, and we appreciate you sending them our way. And finally, shout out to our mods who keep the mod the fort down for us. Vienti Kiss is in the house. K Bean, shout out to Just Cause. Lean, playing hooky. And our Spotlight supporters, Chris Romero, David B3, and Dr. EMB in the house. I'm grateful for you all Spotlight supporters, and they're contributing to the show with a little bit, extra financial love and oomph, and I appreciate it from our friends. But that is it for us, my friends. We're going to leave it right there. Michael Krogan sent in a thumbs up. Thank you, Michael, through that run right there. I appreciate it before we leave it here for the day. We'll be back tomorrow, everybody. Have a tremendous evening. Sleep very well, and I'll see you right back here on the next one. Bye-bye, my friends.